Some of the hardest decisions in life begin with a quiet realization. The people you love are not always the people who can accept the person you are becoming. Family is often described as our safest place, the place where we can return without pretending, without explaining, and without fear of being rejected. But there is another side of family that rarely gets discussed. The people who knew you when you were a child may sometimes have the hardest time accepting you as an adult. They remember your old personality. They remember the role you played. They remember the version of you who stayed quiet, kept the peace, followed expectations, accepted criticism, or constantly tried to make everyone happy. And when that version begins to disappear, your growth may not feel like growth to them. It may feel like rebellion. It may feel like distance. It may even feel like betrayal. But what if becoming more independent does not mean you stopped loving your family? What if it means you finally learned how to love them without losing yourself in the process? There comes a point in emotional growth when you begin noticing the difference between connection and control. You start recognizing that love and obligation are not the same thing. You realize that respecting your parents does not mean agreeing with every decision they make. Caring about your siblings does not mean allowing them unlimited access to your time, energy, or private life. Being part of a family does not mean surrendering your right to make your own choices. And this realization can be deeply uncomfortable because many people are taught from childhood that family loyalty should come before almost everything else. You are taught to keep quiet because they are family. You are taught to forgive because they are family. You are taught to tolerate certain behaviors because they are family. But rarely are we taught that healthy family relationships also require boundaries, respect, emotional safety, and the freedom to become an individual. This is where the story becomes much deeper than simply moving away from your family or speaking to them less. Psychological growth is not measured by how far you can run from the people who raised you. It is measured by whether you can finally make decisions from your own values instead of constantly making them from fear, guilt, or the need for approval. There is a major difference between becoming cold and becoming emotionally independent. A cold person may stop caring. An emotionally independent person still cares, but no longer allows another person's reaction to determine their identity. That distinction can change everything. You can love someone and still say no. You can forgive someone and still keep your distance. You can understand where someone comes from and still refuse to repeat the patterns they gave you. You can appreciate what your family provided while also recognizing what you need to leave behind. And this is where many people experience a painful form of confusion. They begin changing, but the people around them continue responding to the old version of them. You become more confident, and suddenly you are called arrogant. You become more private, and suddenly you are called secretive. You stop accepting disrespect, and suddenly you are called difficult. You begin making your own decisions, and suddenly you are accused of forgetting where you came from. You stop participating in endless arguments, and suddenly people claim you do not care anymore. The more you change, the more pressure you may feel to return to who you used to be. Not necessarily because your family hates you, but because people become comfortable with familiar roles. When one person changes, the entire relationship can feel different. There is a lesser known truth about personal growth that makes this even more complicated. Growing psychologically often means becoming more comfortable with disappointing people. That sounds simple, but it can be incredibly difficult when you were raised to believe that keeping everyone happy is a sign of being a good person. If you learned early in life to measure your worth through approval, then setting a boundary can feel like doing something wrong. Saying no can trigger guilt. Creating distance can make you question yourself. Choosing your own path can make you wonder whether you have become selfish. But guilt is not always proof that you have made a bad decision. Sometimes guilt is simply the emotional response that appears when you stop performing an old role. That is why this video is not about telling you to abandon your family. It is about understanding what happens inside a person when they begin separating their identity from family expectations. There are situations where distance may be necessary. There are also situations where communication, patience, and healthier boundaries can repair a relationship. The important question is not whether distance is always good or whether family is always bad. The real question is whether your relationship with your family allows you to remain yourself. Because there is a difference between staying connected because you genuinely want the relationship and staying connected because you are terrified of what will happen if you step away. Throughout this video, we are going to explore why some
people reach a stage where they need more space from their family, what psychology can teach us about emotional independence, why family roles
can become difficult to escape, and why setting boundaries can sometimes feel like betrayal even when those boundaries are healthy. We will also look at the difference between healthy distance and emotional avoidance, because not every disagreement is a reason to cut someone off. Sometimes people create distance because they are protecting themselves. Other times, they create distance because they are running from accountability. Knowing the difference is one of the most important parts of emotional maturity.
You will also discover why the strongest form of independence is not necessarily moving away, going no contact, or refusing to speak to anyone from your past.
The deeper form of
Independence happens internally.
It happens when your family's approval is no longer the foundation of your self-worth. It happens when criticism no longer controls your decisions. It happens when you can hear disappointment without immediately changing yourself to make someone comfortable. It happens when you stop explaining every decision simply because you are afraid someone might misunderstand you. And perhaps most importantly, it happens when you realize that being misunderstood does not automatically mean you are wrong. By the end of this video, you may look at family relationships differently. You may understand why creating distance can sometimes be an act of self-respect rather than rejection. You may also recognize that you do not have to hate someone to create a boundary with them. You do not have to erase the past to build a different future. And you do not have to choose between loving your family and becoming your own person. Sometimes the healthiest relationship is created when two people
Finally, enough space to stop controlling each other and start relating to each other as adults.
Because real evolution is not about becoming detached from everyone. It is not about becoming so independent that you no longer need anyone. And it is certainly not about proving that you are stronger than the people who raised you. Real evolution is quieter than that. It is the moment you stop abandoning yourself just to remain accepted. It is the moment you understand that your life belongs to you. It is the moment you can look at the people who shaped you and say, without anger and without hatred, I can love you without becoming you. I can respect you without surrendering myself. And I can walk my own path without believing that I am a bad person for doing it. So stay with me until the end, because the final part of this video may change the way you understand distance, family, guilt, and personal growth. You may discover that the goal was never to become farther away from the people you love. The goal was to become close enough to yourself that you no longer have to disappear just to keep someone else comfortable.
Welcome to Conscious Empath Hub, where we explore psychology, emotional growth, relationships, and the hidden patterns that shape the way we live and connect with others.
If you want honest conversations about emotional intelligence and personal transformation, subscribe to the channel and let's begin. The first identity you ever had was probably not one you consciously chose. Before you understood your personality, your values, your strengths, or even your own preferences, your family had already begun teaching you who you were. Long before you could ask, "Who am I?" people around you were giving you answers, you were the quiet one, the responsible one, the sensitive one, the successful one, the difficult one, the funny one, the peacemaker, the rebellious one, the child who always helped, the child who needed more attention, the child who never caused problems. These descriptions may have started as simple observations, but over time, they can become much more powerful than they appear. A child does not simply hear these labels. A child learns from them. A child begins watching how people respond to that identity. Approval comes when the role is performed correctly. Disapproval appears when the role is challenged. And slowly, without making a conscious decision, the child learns that being accepted may depend on remaining a certain kind of person. This is one of the quiet ways a family can shape personality, not only through what parents directly teach, but through the roles they repeatedly assign, the reactions they have to different behaviors, and the expectations that become normal inside the home. Think about the child who is always described as responsible. At first, it may sound like a compliment. You are mature, you are dependable. You always know what to do. You can handle things. Those words can feel good, especially when a child wants to feel valuable. But if that identity becomes too strong, the child may eventually learn that being needed is the safest way to receive approval. They may become uncomfortable asking for help. They may feel guilty when they rest. They may believe that making a mistake means disappointing everyone. As they grow older, they may become the person who solves problems for everyone else while quietly ignoring their own needs. Their family may not even understand why this happens. From the outside, it looks like strength. But internally, the person may be carrying a belief that says, I am valuable when I am useful. The role that once helped them feel important can eventually become a prison. And because everyone around them has become accustomed to that role, changing it can create tension. The same thing can happen to the quiet child. Perhaps this child learned early that speaking up created conflict. Maybe whenever they expressed anger, disagreement, or frustration, someone told them they were being disrespectful. Maybe their feelings were dismissed because another family member was louder or more demanding. So they learned to stay quiet. They learned to observe. They learned to swallow their reactions. They learned to keep the peace. Over time, the family may begin describing them as naturally calm, easygoing, or low maintenance. But what the family sees as personality may actually include years of adaptation. The child may not have been naturally comfortable with silence. They may simply have discovered that silence was safer. And when that child becomes an adult and finally begins expressing opinions, setting boundaries, or saying no, the family may experience the change as shocking. They may say, "You were never like this." But the deeper truth may be that the person was always capable of speaking. They simply did not always feel safe enough to do it. This is why family identity can become so complicated. A family does not only remember your past, it can unconsciously organize itself around the version of you that existed in the past. Everyone knows who plays which role.
Everyone knows who calls.
First.
Everyone knows who apologizes. Everyone knows who gives advice,
Who needs advice.
who causes arguments, who avoids arguments, who takes responsibility, and who receives forgiveness.
These patterns can become so familiar that people stop seeing them as patterns. They simply call them personality. That is just how you are. That is just how your brother is. Your sister has always been sensitive. Your father is just difficult. Your mother worries about everything. These statements sound harmless because they describe familiar behavior, but they can also freeze people in place. Once a family has decided who someone is, every new behavior is often interpreted through the old identity. If the responsible child finally says, "I cannot do this for you anymore," the family may not hear a boundary. They may hear selfishness. If the quiet child finally speaks honestly, the family may not hear confidence. They may hear disrespect. If the person who always sacrificed finally chooses themselves, The family may not see growth, they may see betrayal. And this is where adulthood creates a difficult conflict. As a child, adapting to your environment is often necessary. You depend on other people for food, safety, housing, emotional care, and protection. You do not have the same freedom that an adult has. So learning how to read the room, understand expectations, and adjust your behavior can be useful. A child who learns that certain situations require patience may become emotionally intelligent. A child who learns responsibility may become dependable. A child who learns to care about other people may develop empathy. The problem is not that families influence children. Influence is unavoidable. The problem begins when an identity that was useful during childhood becomes a rule that the adult feels forbidden to change. A role that once helped you survive your environment may no longer fit the life you are trying to build. This is one reason personal growth can feel strangely uncomfortable. You are not only changing your habits, you may be challenging an entire identity that has been reinforced for years. If your family knows you as the person who always says yes, your first no may feel unusually powerful. If they know you as the person who never talks about feelings, your first honest conversation may feel almost rebellious. If they know you as the person who always follows tradition, making a different life choice may create tension far beyond the actual decision. The choice itself may not be the real problem. The deeper problem is that the choice threatens an established picture of who you are supposed to be. This is where psychological differentiation becomes important. The differentiation is not about becoming emotionally disconnected from your family. It is about developing the ability to remain connected to people while still maintaining your own thoughts, values, emotions, and decisions. A psychologically differentiated person can hear a parent's opinion without automatically treating it as a command. They can disagree without feeling that the relationship must end. They can tolerate another person's disappointment without immediately changing their decision. They can remain emotionally connected while recognizing that another person's feelings are not always their responsibility to manage. This is a major step in adult development because independence is much deeper than paying your own bills, moving into your own home, or making your own schedule. Financial independence changes your circumstances. Psychological differentiation changes your relationship with yourself. A person can live thousands of miles away from their family and still be psychologically controlled by them. They may make every decision based on what their parents will think. They may choose a career because it will receive approval. They may stay in a relationship because leaving would disappoint their family. They may avoid certain clothes, friendships, hobbies, or lifestyles because they already know how their family would react. Physically, they are independent. Internally, they are still asking for permission. This is why distance alone does not create maturity. You can move away and still carry the family voice inside your head. You can live alone and still feel guilty for choosing yourself. You can stop speaking to someone and still spend years trying to prove that you were right. The deeper work is learning how to hear your own voice without automatically replacing it with the voices that shaped you. Sometimes that internal voice sounds exactly like a parent. You should be doing more. People will judge you. Families comes first. You are being selfish. You need to think about what everyone else wants. Good children do not behave this way. You owe us. These messages can become so deeply internalized that no one needs to say them anymore. The person says them to themselves. That is one of the most powerful parts of family conditioning. Eventually, external expectations can become internal rules. You may believe you are making a free decision when, underneath the surface, you are simply trying to avoid an old feeling of disapproval. And disapproval can be extremely powerful when approval was connected to belonging. For a child, belonging is not a small thing. It is closely tied to security. A child does not usually think, I disagree with my family's values, but I am comfortable accepting the consequences. A child thinks in much simpler terms. Will they still love me? Am I good? Did I do something wrong? Are they angry with me? This is why certain family experiences can leave such deep emotional patterns. A person may become an adult with a highly developed ability to understand other people's reactions, but to a much weaker ability to identify their own needs. They can tell when someone is uncomfortable. They can tell when someone is disappointed. They can tell when someone is angry. They can tell when a conversation is about to become tense. But when asked what they personally want, they may have no clear answer.
They became experts at reading everyone else because reading everyone else once felt more important than reading themselves.
The person who grows up as the
Peacemaker can experience this especially strongly.
maybe there were frequent disagreements at home, and they learned to calm everyone down. Maybe they became the one who apologized first, even when they were not responsible. Maybe they learned that conflict was dangerous, and that harmony had to be protected at any cost. As an adult, they may become extremely uncomfortable when someone is angry with them. A simple disagreement can feel like a major threat. They may over-explain. They may apologize too quickly. They may abandon their own position just to restore peace. And because the family has benefited from their ability to maintain harmony, their change may be resisted. When the peacemaker finally stops mediating every conflict, people may complain that they have become distant. But what may actually be happening is that they are learning that other adults are responsible for managing their own emotions. The same pattern appears in the person who becomes the family caretaker. They learn to anticipate what everyone needs. They notice who is tired. They remember birthdays. They solve practical problems. They provide emotional support. They become the person everyone calls when life becomes difficult. There is genuine strength in caring for others, but there is a difference between choosing to care and feeling that you have no right not to care. When the second pattern develops, self-sacrifice becomes part of identity. The person may feel uncomfortable receiving attention. They may feel selfish for resting. They may even feel guilty when their life begins going well while someone else is struggling. This can create an invisible loyalty to the family system. They may unconsciously believe that growing too far beyond their family will make them disloyal, so they hold themselves back. That is why some forms of personal growth create unexpected guilt. When you change your life, you may be moving beyond an identity that other people still expect you to carry. Perhaps you become financially successful while your family expects you to remain available for every problem. Perhaps you develop a healthier relationship while your family is accustomed to seeing you as the unstable one. Perhaps you become more confident while they are comfortable with you being the quiet one. Perhaps you stop participating in old arguments while everyone else still expects you to defend yourself. Your growth can expose the fact that the old family system depended on your old behavior. This does not necessarily mean your family is consciously trying to hold you back. That distinction matters. Human beings generally prefer familiarity. Familiar patterns reduce uncertainty. When one person changes, other people have to adjust. Even positive changes can create discomfort because the relationship has to be renegotiated. A parent who has always made decisions for an adult child may struggle when that child starts making independent choices. A sibling who has always relied on the responsible brother or sister may feel frustrated when that person begins saying no. A family that has always depended on one person to absorb emotional tension may feel confused when that person stops doing it. The resistance can happen without anyone sitting down and deciding to control the person. The old system simply tries to return to what it knows. This is one reason boundaries can reveal family dynamics that were previously invisible. A boundary does not create every problem. Sometimes it reveals the problem that was already there. If you tell someone, I am not comfortable discussing my personal relationship with you, and they respect it, the relationship may become healthier. If they repeatedly pressure you, insult you, guilt you, or demand explanations, you learn something important about the relationship. If you say, I cannot lend money this time, and the other person accepts it, there is room for mutual respect. If they respond by attacking your character and reminding you of everything they have ever done for you, the boundary has exposed a deeper expectation. The question becomes less about the specific request and more about whether you are allowed to have limits. This is also why adulthood can change the meaning of family loyalty. As a child, loyalty may mean obedience. As an adult, healthy loyalty can mean honesty, respect, and mutual care. Those are not the same thing.
Obedience asks, will you do what I expect?
Mutual respect asks,
Can we remain connected, even when we do not agree?
that difference is enormous.
If your relationship depends entirely on compliance, then your independence will always feel threatening
to the relationship. But if your relationship is built on respect, then differences can exist without destroying connection. Psychological differentiation allows a person to tolerate those differences. You can say, my family does not agree with my decision, and I can live with that. You can hear disappointment without experiencing it as rejection. You can recognize that your parents have their own fears, beliefs, history, and expectations without making those things your identity. You can understand their perspective without surrendering your own. That is a sophisticated emotional skill because it requires two ideas to exist at the same time. I care about you, and I disagree with you. I understand why you feel that way, and I am still making my own decision. I respect what you have done for me, and I am not required to live the life you would choose for me. Mature relationships can hold these contradictions. Immature relationship patterns often demand one side or the other. This is why growing up psychologically can sometimes feel lonely, even when you are surrounded by people. You begin noticing that some of your relationships were built around an older version of you. You may realize that certain conversations always return to the same arguments because everyone expects you to play the same part. You may notice you feel like a child whenever you enter your family home, even though you are fully capable of making adult decisions everywhere else. You may suddenly understand why you behave differently around your relatives than you do around friends or colleagues. The environment activates the old identity. Your posture changes, your language changes, your confidence changes. You may become defensive, quiet, overly agreeable, or unusually emotional. It can feel as though you have temporarily become the younger version of yourself again. There is nothing mysterious about this. Context influences behavior. Human beings respond to familiar social patterns. When you return to an environment where certain roles were established years ago, old reactions can become easier to access. The adult you have built in the outside world may collide with the child identity that was formed inside the family. This can explain why someone who is confident at work may become nervous around a parent. Someone who is assertive with friends may become silent around a sibling. Someone who gives excellent advice to others may suddenly question every decision when a family member criticizes them. It is not necessarily because they are weak. It may be because the old emotional system has been activated. The challenge is learning to recognize that activation without allowing it to control you. You begin asking yourself different questions. Am I actually doing something wrong, or am I simply feeling guilty? Do I disagree with this person, or am I afraid of their reaction? Do I want to say yes, or do I want to avoid disappointing them? Am I helping because I genuinely choose to help, or because I am afraid of what will happen if I refuse? These questions are simple, but they can reveal years of conditioning. They move you from automatic reaction toward conscious choice. That movement from reaction to choice is at the heart of psychological differentiation. Instead of immediately absorbing another person's emotional state, you pause. Instead of treating criticism as a command, you evaluate it. Instead of assuming that someone else's anger means you have done something wrong, you examine the situation. Instead of trying to control another person's feelings, you allow them to have their feelings. This does not make you uncaring. It makes you more responsible for the right thing, your own behavior, your own choices, and your own emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is especially important here because family relationships can activate intense emotions. The closer the relationship, the more powerful the emotional reaction can be. A stranger criticizing you may be annoying. A parent saying the same words can cut much deeper. A coworker disagreeing with your decision may be manageable. A sibling saying you have changed may make you question your entire identity. This happens because family relationships carry history. Every present interaction exists alongside years of memories, expectations, disappointments, affection, and unresolved conflict. You are not responding only to the sentence that was spoken today. Part of you may be responding to everything that sentence represents. That is why personal growth often requires slowing down the reaction. You do not have to answer immediately. You do not have to defend yourself instantly. You do not have to prove that you are a good person. You can take time to understand what happened. You can decide whether the criticism contains useful information. You can accept responsibility if you made a mistake, and you can reject unfair judgment without turning the situation into another battle. This ability to pause is powerful because it gives you space between another person's behavior and your response. In that space, your adult identity becomes stronger than your old family role. The person who is always responsible learns that they are allowed to need help. The quiet one learns that their voice has value. The successful one learns that achievement is not the same as worth.
The difficult one learns that being misunderstood does not make them bad.
The peacemaker learns that conflict between other adults is not always their responsibility. The caretaker learns that love does not require constant sacrifice. The family rebel learns that independence does not require constant opposition. Each person begins separating who they are from the role they were given. This separation can feel frightening because roles provide certainty. If you know you are the responsible one, you know what to do. If you know you are the peacemaker, you know what to do. If you know you are the quiet one, you know what not to do. Leaving the role means entering uncertainty. You may have to discover your preferences without using your family's expectations as a guide. You may have to decide what your values are instead of simply following inherited ones. You may have to learn that being kind does not mean always agreeing. You may have to learn that being strong does not mean never needing anyone. You may have to learn that being independent does not mean refusing support. This is the deeper meaning of becoming your own person. It is not about rejecting everything you were taught. Some family values may be worth keeping. Some traditions may genuinely matter to you. Some lessons from your parents may become part of your adult identity because you freely choose them. Psychological differentiation does not demand rebellion. It demands ownership. You can take what is useful and leave what is harmful. You can keep the values that reflect who you are while questioning the rules that no longer fit. You can appreciate where you came from without allowing your past to dictate every part of your future. That distinction becomes especially important when people talk about distancing themselves from family. Distance is not always the first or best answer. Sometimes the first step is internal. You may need to stop expecting your family to validate every decision. You may need to stop explaining yourself. You may need to stop interpreting every disagreement as rejection. You may need to stop trying to convince people that you are no longer the child they remember. You simply begin living differently. Over time, your actions communicate the change more clearly than arguments ever could. There can be a strange period during this process when your family may not recognize the person you are becoming, and you may not fully recognize yourself either. You are no longer comfortable with the old role, but the new identity is still developing. You may say no and feel guilty. You may set a boundary and then spend the entire evening questioning whether you were too harsh.
You may choose yourself and then feel the urge to apologize for it. This does not necessarily mean the boundary was wrong. It can mean that your emotional system
Has not yet caught up with your conscious decision. You are practicing a new way of relating. Practice matters because psychological growth rarely happens in one dramatic moment. It happens through repeated choices. You tell the truth even when approval is uncertain. You respect your own limits, even when someone is disappointed. You listen to criticism without automatically accepting it. You apologize when you genuinely make a mistake, but you stop apologizing simply for having needs. You allow other adults to experience their own emotions without rushing to fix them. You make decisions because they align with your values, not because they guarantee approval. Each choice strengthens the separation between your identity and the role you were assigned. Eventually, something begins to change. You may still care deeply about what your family thinks, but their opinions no longer determine what you think about yourself. That is a major difference. You do not become indifferent. You become grounded. You can listen without surrendering. You can love without obeying every expectation. You can disagree without feeling that the relationship has to collapse. You can walk away from a conversation without spending hours trying to prove your innocence. You can return to your own life without carrying every emotional reaction with you. And this
is where family relationships can become healthier. Not necessarily because everyone changed, but because you changed your position within the relationship.
You are no longer approaching your family as the child who needs approval to feel safe. You are approaching them as an adult who can care, listen, disagree, negotiate, and choose. That shift can create discomfort at first, but it also creates the possibility of a more honest relationship. A relationship between adults has more room for difference than a relationship built around obedience. You no longer need to perform the old role to earn your place. The difficult part is that not every family will respond well to this change. Some families adapt. Some need time. Some become defensive. Some may continue trying to pull you back into the old role. When that happens, the challenge is not simply deciding whether to stay close or create distance. The deeper challenge is deciding how much access another person should have to your emotional life when they repeatedly refuse to recognize your adulthood. That is where boundaries become more important. And the more clearly you understand the identity you were given, the easier it becomes to recognize when you are responding from your present self and when you are being pulled back into an old version of yourself. This is where one of the deepest misunderstandings about family begins. Many people grow up believing that love automatically creates unlimited access. If someone is your parent, they should always be able to call you. If someone is your sibling, you should always be available. If someone helped raise you, you should always put their needs before your own. If someone shares your blood, you should forgive almost anything. These ideas can sound loving on the surface, but they can become dangerous when they remove the idea of personal boundaries. Family can matter deeply without having unlimited access to your time, your emotions, your private decisions, your home, your money, or your attention. The fact that someone is related to you explains the relationship. It does not automatically determine the rules of the relationship. And learning that difference can be one of the most important steps in emotional maturity. Because many adults spend years confusing love with obligation, loyalty with obedience, responsibility with self-sacrifice, and guilt with proof that they have done something wrong. Love is one of the strongest human bonds we experience, but love is not the same thing as unlimited availability. You can genuinely love someone and still need space from them. You care about their feelings without allowing their feelings to control every decision you make. You can want the best for someone while refusing to participate in behavior that damages you. You can remember the good things a person has done for you while also acknowledging the ways the relationship has become unhealthy. These ideas can exist together. They do not cancel each other out. In fact, mature love often requires the ability to hold several truths at once. You can say, "This person matters to me," while also saying, "This behavior is not acceptable to me." You can say, "I am grateful for what my family has given me," while also saying, "I need to make different choices for my own life." You can say, "I forgive you," without saying, "You can treat me the same way again." That distinction is easy to understand intellectually, but emotionally, it can be incredibly difficult when you were raised to believe that family loyalty means always staying close. One reason this becomes so complicated is that family relationships often begin before we have the ability to choose them. You do not choose your parents. You do not choose the family system you were born into. You do not choose the emotional habits that surround you during childhood. You enter an existing world, and you learn how that world works. You learn who gets listened to. You learn who gets ignored. You learn what happens when someone says no. You learn whether anger is accepted or punished. You learn whether privacy is respected. You learn whether disagreement is safe. You learn whether love feels unconditional or whether it seems connected to obedience. You absorb these lessons long before you have the language to explain them. So when you become an adult and begin questioning those rules, it can feel as if you are questioning something much bigger than a specific family expectation. It can feel as though you are challenging the definition of what it means to be a good son, a good daughter, a good brother, or a good sister. This is where obligation can become confused with love. Obligation says, "I have to do this because you are family." Love says, "I choose to do this because you matter to me." Those two experiences can look identical from the outside. You might visit your parent because you genuinely want to spend time with them. You might also visit because you are terrified of being called selfish if you do not. The action is the same, but the emotional foundation is completely different. One comes from choice, the other comes from pressure. One can strengthen a relationship, the other can slowly create resentment. When a person repeatedly does things they do not want to do because they are afraid of disappointing their family, they may eventually begin feeling trapped by relationships they still genuinely care about. That resentment can be confusing because the person may think, "But I love them. Why am I so angry?" The answer may be that love is not the problem. The absence of choice is the problem. When you constantly sacrifice your own needs without acknowledging that you are making a sacrifice, resentment can quietly build underneath the surface. You agree to the visit, you answer the call, you solve the problem, you lend the money, you listen for hours, you cancel your plans, you take responsibility for someone else's emotions, you say yes when you mean no. And every time you tell yourself that this is what love requires, eventually a part of you starts asking a painful question. When does my life become mine? This is why boundaries are not the opposite of love. In many situations, boundaries are what allow love to remain genuine. Without boundaries, relationships can become filled with hidden contracts. I did this for you, so you should do this for me. I raised you, so you owe me access to your life. I am your mother, so you should tell me everything. I am your brother, so you should always take my side. We are family, so you cannot say no to me. These expectations can become so normal that people stop questioning them. But a relationship based entirely on debt does not feel like freedom. It feels like a transaction. The person may receive care, but they may not feel free to choose. And choice matters because adult relationships are healthiest when both people have agency. A parent may have enormous importance in your life, but adulthood changes the nature of that relationship. The child who once depended on the parent eventually becomes a person capable of making independent decisions. The parent may still offer advice, support, and love, but the adult child has the right to decide what to accept. This does not mean parents become irrelevant. It means their role changes. The relationship can move from authority to connection, from command to conversation, from control to mutual respect. That transition can be difficult for families that became comfortable with the old structure. The same applies to siblings. Being related does not mean you must be emotionally available at every moment. You can care about your brother and still refuse to participate in his repeated conflicts. You can love your sister and still decline to discuss private details of your relationship with her. You can want your sibling to succeed without becoming responsible for fixing every problem in their life. You can celebrate their achievements while maintaining your own boundaries. And if a relationship becomes consistently disrespectful, manipulative, or emotionally exhausting, creating some distance does not automatically mean you stopped loving that person. It may mean you recognize that closeness and love are not the same measurement. This distinction becomes even more important when forgiveness enters the conversation. Forgiveness is often presented as if it automatically requires reconciliation. Someone hurts you, you forgive them. Therefore, you should allow them back into the same position in your life. But those are separate decisions. Forgiveness can be an internal process. Reconciliation is a relational process. Forgiveness may involve releasing some of the anger you carry. Reconciliation requires trust, accountability, change behavior, and a willingness from both people to rebuild the relationship. You can forgive someone without giving them the same access they had before. You can wish them well without inviting them back into your private life. You can stop carrying hatred without pretending that nothing happened. This is particularly important because people sometimes use forgiveness as a way to pressure someone back into an unhealthy relationship. But they are your parents. You only get one family. You need to let the past go. You will regret this when they are gone. These statements may come from concern, but they can also place emotional pressure on someone who is trying to establish boundaries. The assumption is that because family relationships are important, preserving closeness must always be the highest goal. But preserving closeness at the cost of psychological well-being is not automatically healthy. Sometimes a relationship needs repair. Sometimes it needs limits. Sometimes it needs time. Sometimes it needs a completely different structure. The fear surrounding family distance is also worth examining because fear can disguise itself as loyalty. A person may say, "I stay because I love them," when part of the truth is, "I am terrified of what will happen if I leave." They may fear being judged by relatives. They may fear being called ungrateful. They may fear losing other relationships connected to the family. They may fear being alone. They may fear regret. They may fear that something bad will happen and they will blame themselves. They may fear that choosing distance makes them a bad person. These fears can be powerful enough to keep someone in a relationship long after they've recognized that the current dynamic is damaging them. Fear is not the same thing as love. That sounds obvious, but in emotionally complicated families, the two can become intertwined. You can feel love and fear at the same time. You can care about someone and still be afraid of their reaction. You can want a relationship while also feeling exhausted by it. This is why emotional decisions about family are rarely simple. A person may not want to lose the relationship. They may simply want the relationship to change. They may not want to disappear. They may want to stop being controlled. They may not want revenge. They may want peace. They may not want to punish anyone. They may simply want enough space to breathe. Guilt creates another layer of confusion. Guilt can be useful when it points toward genuine responsibility. If you hurt someone intentionally, broke a promise, or behaved unfairly, guilt can motivate you to repair the damage. But guilt can also appear when you have done nothing wrong. You can feel guilty for saying no. You can feel guilty for moving away. You can feel guilty for becoming successful. You can feel guilty for spending time with your partner instead of your family. You can feel guilty for not answering a call immediately. You can feel guilty for wanting privacy. You can feel guilty for needing rest. The existence of guilt does not automatically prove that you have violated a moral responsibility. This is a crucial psychological distinction because people who are highly sensitive to family approval may interpret guilt as evidence. They think, if I feel this bad, I must be doing something wrong. But emotions are information, not always verdicts. Guilt can tell you that something matters to you. It does not always tell you that your behavior is wrong.
A person who has spent years putting everyone else's needs first may experience intense guilt the first time they prioritize themselves. The guilt may simply reflect how unfamiliar self-prioritization feels.
It can be the emotional cost of changing an old pattern. Think about the person who has always been the family problem solver. Everyone knows they will answer the phone. Everyone knows they will help. Everyone knows they will show up. One day, that person says, I cannot do this right now. Nothing harmful has happened. They have not abandoned anyone. They have simply reached a limit. Yet they may feel enormous guilt afterward. They may replay the conversation. They may wonder whether they were selfish. They may send another message to explain. They may eventually agree to help anyway. And if this happens repeatedly, the family learns that the boundary is not real. The person says no, feels guilty, and then returns to yes. The cycle continues. Breaking that cycle requires understanding responsibility. You are responsible for your choices. You're responsible for how you treat people. You're responsible for repairing harm when you genuinely cause it. But you are not responsible for making every person around you comfortable. You are not responsible for eliminating every disappointment. You are not responsible for protecting adults from every uncomfortable emotion. You are not responsible for solving every family problem. And you are not responsible for sacrificing your mental and emotional resources simply because someone shares your last name. This does not mean becoming careless. Responsibility still matters. If your parent needs reasonable support and you are genuinely able to provide it, helping can be an expression of love. If your sibling is going through a difficult period and you choose to be there, that can be meaningful. The issue is not helping. The issue is whether helping is freely chosen or demanded through guilt. There is a difference between I want to support you and I am terrified to say no. There is a difference between generosity and emotional coercion. There is a difference between being dependable and being unable to have boundaries. Healthy responsibility leaves room for choice. You can say yes because you want to. You can say no when you cannot. You can explain when necessary. You can negotiate. You can offer an alternative. You can decide how much you can realistically give. Unhealthy obligation often leaves no room for any of this. The expectation becomes absolute. You must answer, you must attend, you must agree, you must forgive, you must provide, you must stay close, and if you refuse, your character is attacked. You are selfish, you are cold. You have changed, you do not care, you think you are better than everyone. These labels can be powerful because they attack identity rather than discussing the actual boundary. This is where the idea of family loyalty deserves careful examination. Loyalty can be a beautiful quality. It can mean standing beside someone during hardship. It can mean remembering where you came from. It can mean caring about people even when life becomes complicated. But loyalty without judgment can become destructive. If loyalty means protecting someone from the consequences of their actions, covering for them, accepting repeated disrespect, or abandoning your own values to prove your devotion, then loyalty has become something else. It has become self-erasure. Real loyalty does not require you to betray yourself. A person can be loyal to their family while refusing to lie for them. They can love their parents while disagreeing with their choices. They can support a sibling without financing every destructive decision.
They can maintain a relationship while refusing to participate in harmful behavior.
This is difficult because families often have unspoken rules about what should remain inside the family. Sometimes those rules create privacy and trust, but sometimes they prevent people from speaking honestly about serious problems. The phrase, "keep it in the family," can become a powerful tool for maintaining silence. And when silence is treated as loyalty, the person who finally speaks can be accused of betrayal. There is another uncomfortable reality here. Family members can sometimes use the history of sacrifice to maintain present control. After everything I did for you, I gave up so much for this family. You would not have what you have without me. You owe me. These statements contain real history. Parents often make enormous sacrifices for their children. Caregivers give time, money, energy, sleep, opportunities, and